Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello.
And another seismic delay has landed in our laps.
It's just been one of those weeks, hasn't it?
2077, yes. I mean, we had the Avengers, we had Final Fantasy VII, and now Cyberpunk 2077 is delayed into September. Do they have a specific date?
Oh, they did, Scott, but this has been faster. I think it's like the, I'm pretty sure it's September the 17th.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
almost certain. It's not September the 4th, which is the Avengers date, but I'm pretty sure it's the 17th or the 16th or something around there.
It doesn't really matter. The point is that we thought we'd sit down because there's contrasting statements as to what they put out on Twitter and what was then said at a private sort of Q&A that GameSpot reported on, where Martin Nowinski was, I think it was Martin Nowinski, CDPR's
the core CEO, yes.
Top brass, talking about the real reason behind why the game is delayed, and a lot of it centers on crunch, which is one of the most contentious things that CDPR have also commented on in the past.
Yes, well, we'll start with the Twitter initial press release, because that sounded actually quite promising. They said that the game is playable from start to finish, and essentially that the extra months were just to polish the ambitious title. The exact quote was, "Night City is massive, full of stories, content, and places to visit, but due to the sheer scale and complexity of it all, we need more time to finish playtesting, fixing, and polishing." So the idea is essentially that they made it clear that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the game. Yeah. They just want it to be the best end product they can be. They even said that they wanted it to be Cyberpunk 2077 to be our crowning achievement for this generation. So they are putting everything in this. They went to the board of directors, they voted unanimously to delay the game. Okay. So they couldn't have a Witcher 3 situation. And that might sound kind of a strange thing to say, but The Witcher 3, for as beloved as it was, had a lot of performance issues, at least on console at launch, that were reported on. And I think that the general idea is that they don't want that to happen again, and they want to make sure that all of the quests, have the same amount of consequence and, importance as they should have. But that's just the surface of it. That's like the PR speak. Like you said, there was a Q&A afterwards, and that was a little bit uglier because it was confirmed that employees are now expected to work extra hours, and that they admitted that a crunch period will be essentially in effect until release. And even worse, sorry to cut you off, but apparently the employees didn't actually know about the delay until minutes before the press release went live. So you can imagine that with the release date imminent, they were already working extra long hours, and now they've got this, a couple months ahead.
Yeah, I'll play flip side in regards to the way that Nowinski phrased stuff. He did say it's unfortunate, it's sad that they have to do it. And on the developer side, every developer always knows when they're releasing something that is subpar. Yeah. So I think that as much as them being told only minutes beforehand sucks, but there assumedly would have been some sort of internal communication as to saying if we release it as it is, this isn't what it could be, and we would rather we had some additional time. So I'm going to assume that part. But I have to I have to assume there is a good side to. I'm in full support of them delaying the game overall, but in terms of the mentality within the studio, if you were working your absolute ass off on that game, having more time to perfect it and stuff, I have to imagine that would come through as a sigh of relief, as opposed to being oh my god, we have to go gold really soon, and it's not ready.
Well, they did mention that they are obviously taking this seriously, and that they're going to implement certain plans and practices to try to lessen the amount of work that needs to be done, because The Witcher 3 was notorious for an apparent year-long crunch period that just burned everyone out, and that was widely reported on. And after the likes of Rockstar and BioWare have been reported on by the likes of Kotaku, it seems like crunch is more of a salient issue in the industry that people are at least taking steps to try and stamp out. In my opinion, from what has been said, it's not quite enough, because I'll read you out a quote now. In regards to crunch, he said, yes, to quote, "To some degree, yes, to be honest, there will be crunch. We try to limit crunch as much as possible, but it is the final stage. We try to be reasonable in this regard, but yes, unfortunately, there will be crunch." And then he went on to say, "You sacrifice some things to do that and be part of that," i.e. creating the game. "There are a lot of people who come into the industry that are fresh. They don't really understand what it takes to actually do it." He went on to say, "So we get a lot of new guys coming in and they go, oh god, this is too much. But then we have other guys come in from Rockstar Games and they're like, this isn't even crunch."
Well, they used to, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So they're doing the best they can to keep work under control, but sometimes when you're doing some big-ass game like this, direct quote, it's not always possible to do that. It really takes hard work to really make it awesome.
Oh man, we can start referring to it as big-ass Cyberpunk.
The big-ass game.
Big-ass game, Cyberpunk getting delayed. In regards to Witcher 3, because we can talk about, there's a multiplayer announcement in here as well. In fact, let's get that out of the way to get all the facts done.
Well, yes, it's been a sort of open secret that there has been a Cyberpunk multiplayer game in the works for a while, but in response to this game being delayed, that multiplayer game has also been delayed to 2022 at the earliest, and that's described as a proper AAA experience. It's not going to be like Gwent, for as good as it was, it's easier to craft. This is a proper companion piece set in the same world with the same production values as the main game that has now been knocked back, presumably until the end of 2022.
I mean, as a quick aside for that, are you bothered about Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer?
No, I'd rather than focus on one thing at a time. I'm open to it, but finish the main game first.
Yeah, I think that's imperative. It's worth pointing out. It's strange what happened with The Witcher 3 because it's one of my favorite games of all time. A lot of people absolutely adore it. That game did not have a smooth launch though. No. Besides the fact that I remember totting them up. It's about 12 to 15 patches that eventually overhauled it. The game's UI was completely changed. The way that Geralt moved was changed slightly in regards to the Geralt movement thing. But a whole bunch of different patches were applied to that game to get it to like a sort of, reasonable standard. But even then, that came after the whole downgrade controversy in regards to the way that it was shown off in years prior, which again, like Martin Nowinski got out there and talked about what do we really mean by downgrade in regards to, the version of The Witcher 3 that we got was the best that they could do based on the size of the world that it ended up as, and graphics were cranked earlier on because the game world was smaller. And so he was trying to sort of delve into the philosophy of downgrades, but that term or that assumption that you're maybe not getting what was advertised sort of dogged CDPR for the first couple of years of The Witcher 3, or at least especially that launch period.
It's funny you should mention because in the Q&A they actually mentioned that although showing off the game to press events like E3 is a weight off the developers' back because they get to see some of their work finally realized and people responding to it. I think the quote was it sort of puts them in a vice-like grip because then they have to either live up to that, and any changes, like you said, it's taken really seriously, and there might be a backlash. You have to live up to this vision that you put off, and that's not always possible because of just natural problems in the development time. And it feels like we've seen that extended piece of gameplay from Cyberpunk 2077 so far. We've seen almost an hour of footage directly from the actual title. So everything, I think, in their minds needs to be as as layered and as rich and as deep as that slice that we saw.
I think the way that they've rolled it out has been, I keep using strange and weird. I think it stood out because they had that whole thing where they had a press-only event where it was they showed off that 45-minute demo to select members of the press, and then everybody on the other side, us included because we didn't go to that event, were just saying oh my god, we just want to see it. We don't want to hear about it from someone else. Just let us see the footage. If you're not going hands-on with it, then you don't really need this sort of nuanced games press coverage in regards to what did this player think and what did this player think. If it's just a 45-minute demo, just put it out. And then they sort of yielded and did that, and they said, well, look, we weren't really planning on showing this to the world, but here it is. And we sort of, we managed to get eyes on that. But what do you think of the way that they've handled it so far? Because
it's been really odd. Especially when we were doing our, we were looking at the first half of the year and the games that were coming out. We were talking about this title and how that we have seen a chunk of it, and yet it's been rolled out in such a strange way that we kind of just want to play it for ourselves, if that makes sense. And it's been I don't know, I feel like when it comes to all the games that have been announced for this year, we've seen so many of them being pushed back by now. Obviously, like we said earlier in the week, we had Avengers and we had Final Fantasy. Before that, we had a bunch of Ubisoft stuff, and it feels like a lot of them perhaps might have jumped the gun a little bit or got their messaging a little bit wrong, and now they're being pushed off so they can more or less restart in a way and then get you excited for them all over again. What this means for the next gen, I don't know, but there was a little bit of tidbit in there that CD Projekt RED aren't planning on making Cyberpunk 2077. I keep messing that up even though I've said it so many times. It's not a next gen game, even though it's going to come out a month or two before the next consoles.
Yeah, they did say, this is a while ago, they said that they were planning for the next generation of consoles, and obviously Xbox has already said, or Microsoft have already said that everything that is playable on Xbox One will work on the Series X. As far as we know, the PS5 is backwards compatible as well, so it's you might as well just develop knowing that the consoles are coming and just let everything cross over. The thing that stands out to me though in regards to doing such a last minute delay is what you said, it's almost like they didn't plan it. I know that game development changes so much over time, but for so many high profile studios to all announce they were delaying at the same time, that for me illuminates the fact that publishers imposed demands on developers that they knew they couldn't stick to, or they would have had to do ludicrous amounts of crunch to stick to. And now at the close of the generation, and looking at high profile disappointments like Ghost Recon Breakpoint and WWE 2K20, I think that's given developers enough ammo to go back to them and go, look, you don't want to be this, we need to delay.
Yeah, and you would hope that delays would make the crunch period less extensive. I mean, they've been admitted there that they're going to have to work long hours to finish this title, but I wonder how worse that would have been had they stuck to the original release date, you know what I mean? I'm fine for games getting delayed if it means that developers don't have to go through this process over and over again, because it's just it runs everyone down. We've had so many stories about how it just, kills your love for making games, and that kills the possibility that those games are going to be great and filled with said love, So for me, if a game needs to be delayed to make it better, to make the working conditions better, I'm all for it. We've got enough games. As much as it sucks and you're looking forward to it, like at the end of the day, delays always make games better, and if it makes the working conditions better, I think that needs to happen. Like you said, I do think there is enough ammunition now from titles over the past few years that have disappointed, that have come out buggy, that haven't been worth the amount of stress that developers have been put under. Like I feel so sorry for everyone at BioWare who cares because of the amount of crunch they've had to do for Andromeda and Anthem, and then to look at those final products and be like,
it still doesn't get over the finish line.
No, it still does. It barely makes it over. Like you said.
I think, going forward, I think the industry has to have a very honest and serious conversation about like resource allocation and personnel and everything. In regards to, are these massive games just like, because we always come back on crunch. The only way to get these things over the finish line at all is to throw enough bodies at it until it's done, doing like ludicrous working the amount of hours in a given working week. And even this, even though it's delayed for like another few months, they're still saying there's going to be crunch between now and the end of it. Maybe that's because they had a more relaxed dev cycle until now, and they still need to crunch to get it over the finish line. But I think the industry has to have a pretty honest conversation with itself in regards to, are like some parts of these games too big? Are we taking too many massive risks that don't need to be taken? All that stuff is the next generation.
It's a topic for an entirely different video, but it always comes down to that weird thing or a podcast of games being like art. And when we think about art as a culture, we think about that kind of personal sacrifice, and you want to put everything into it to make it good. And sometimes you impose those limitations on yourself. Like I've stayed back at work trying to finish like articles and stuff. I'm not saying it's the exact same as crunch, but you get into that mentality where you think, I put my all into this, I want to finish it. And there is something about that is kind of infectious. It's when that becomes manipulated by big business,
or
and
expected.
it becomes an abusive thing. Expected. It becomes when you get like these indirect threats of, like, you can work for us, but if you're not going to give us your all, like if you're not doing the same 100-hour shifts as our top brass are doing, then are you really interested? And that's just like incredibly toxic, incredibly manipulative, and should be totally stamped
that
out.
stuff's ugly as hell. Especially when, it's like you broke your back to make sure you did this extra long week, and it's like, well, okay, so you are capable of that. Now do that every day. That stuff gets horrendous pretty quickly. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Hopefully you're as cool with the Cyberpunk delay as we are, but let us know what you think of the game overall. For now though, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
Catch you next time.
Bye.